Here we go.
Well, I want to thank you for allowing us to do this.
All right.
We are taking a video of Mr. George Lund, and this is for the Video History Project for the Brush Creek Mill. So I thank you for allowing us into your home and answering a few questions for us. Well, what we would like first from you is for you to tell us your full name and when and where you were born.
Well, the full name is George R. Lund, better known as Ole Lund. Born in Alpena, Michigan, naturally, and February 22nd, George Washington's birthday, 1920.
1920.
I'm 95 years old at the moment.
Yes.
So, what else?
And so who was your father? What was his name?
Henry.
Henry Lund.
Henry Lund.
And
He's a blacksmith of the old order. 55 years he was a blacksmith.
wow.
And also a very good baseball player. Phenomenal, in fact. He pitched 16-inch softball, which was terrific back in those days. His half-brother, Carl Nelson, beat the New York Celtics 3 games in a row for the world's indoor softball title
Oh, wow.
at the old Memorial Hall
Here in Alpena?
here in Alpena. So there's a little history of baseball.
Yes.
Softball.
Softball.
Yeah. It's pretty good.
That's great. Was your father born here in Alpena?
Yes. Mother and father both born in Alpena. Great-grandfather, Chris Lund, was born in Norway, naturally, and of course immigrated to the States. I don't know too much about great-grandpa.
What drew him here?
That, I really couldn't answer that. I have no...
Do you know what
No
he did
knowledge.
for a living?
He lumbered,
He lumbered.
which is what 90% of the people did back in those days.
So maybe that's what
So,
pulled him here. There was
well, could be. As he got older, naturally he couldn't work, and so the Alpena Council appointed him bridge tender.
And tell me what that means.
Well, the Second Avenue Bridge was what they called a swing bridge, and there was a center island in the river. The bridge was all steel, naturally fabricated deal, and very big, actually. Great-grandpa Chris would spend his time between the Cohen Hardware Store, which was where Alpena Furniture is today,
Okay.
and the Koneski Meat Market, which was across the street. On the corner was Ryan's Smoke Shop and gas station, and the Koneski Meat Market, and then there was a grocery store and a hardware or a furniture store. Excuse me. And back in those days, there was a lot of foot traffic in comparison to today. So Great-grandpa Chris would spend his time visiting in the 2 stores and being locally there. And as the ships came in, they whistled, and of course he knew he had to open the bridge. And so he'd go on the bridge, and the barriers would come down, and he would hire anybody. He didn't hire them, but he would just hail anybody that was walking on the bridge or close by. And so they would have an accumulation of people, sometimes 8, 10, 12, 15 people, would lift the big key. The big key was 16 foot long, had a big hexagon head on it, which fit onto a turntable underneath the bridge.
Oh.
And so people on either side of the key would turn the bridge key, which in turn would turn the bridge. Sometimes there was an overabundance of people who really liked turning the bridge key. And then there were some times where it would lack a few people and it would take a little longer to turn the bridge. But that's how that was operated. It was a big key and a hex section on it, and the bridge didn't turn very fast. It took quite a few turns of the a key to make the bridge
And could it only go so far and then stop?
Yes, it of course was, you know, lengthwise of the river. So that was the highlight of the day.
And those ships would have to wait then until...
Well, they didn't have to wait too long. They would blow the whistle long before they got to the bridge, so that there wouldn't be any hesitation. They would make it through. And most of those ships naturally went to the Fletcher Paper Company with coal, and then there were some lumber ships that still traversed the bridge and traversed the river. So that was interesting. It was.
So what would he do if there weren't enough people there to help him?
Well, there always was enough people.
There always was.
You know.
I'll bet they stood there and waited.
Well, you'd be surprised. Some people did that, you know. But there was always an abundance of people walking. And so I don't think there ever was a problem where there weren't enough people. Usually there were too many.
How many times, say, during the day would he do that?
Well, that I don't know, but I mean...
Were there a lot of ships going through, or just occasional?
No, I don't think. Just occasionally, you know. And of course, as years went on, why the Fletcher Paper Company quit using coal, I guess. I mean, I'm not sure. But the bridge traffic or the river traffic got down to practically nothing. So, but that was an incident, you know, that it was a lot of fun. A lot of kids used to run like crazy to get to the bridge, you know, get on the bridge. And it was quite a thing.
That was probably the highlight of quite a few people's day there.
Yes, yeah, it was going to be a...
Yes.
And there was always enough people in the hardware store or in Kanuski's meat market, you know. They never, I don't think there really were ever a shortage of people who turned the key.
Because they could hear that whistle also.
Yeah, right.
Yes. So what about your mother? What was her maiden name?
Effie. She was a Paint girl. Effie Pake.
Paint?
Pake, P-A-K-E.
Oh, okay.
And her dad was really a lumberman. He was the last of the Red Sash lumbermen. That was the guy that located the key log in the river jam and either loosened it or made sure it was manipulated so that the logs would go down the river.
And that was called what?
It was a Red Sash. I don't know what the actual name would be for it, but he always wore a red sash.
Oh, so as he would go out on the logs, then they knew that he was the one going to...
Right.
How did they do that? How did they find the log?
That's always been I don't know, that's a miracle, I think. But anyway, that's what he did. And then, of course, there was a terrific explosion in one of the mills, and he got caught in that and almost lost his life. And Grandma, Emma Pake, nursed him back to health, but in doing so, she took him out to the Doctors Club, which he and Frank Prince were the first two people that originated the Doctors Club, which was out on M65. And she stayed out there with him for almost a year or more. And of course, my mother and her sisters, they lived at the house on River Street. They were alone, but they were old enough and everything to take care of themselves. But Grandma nursed Grandpa back to good health. And
about when was that? How old do you think your grandpa was?
Oh, he was around. You mean at the mill explosion when? Oh, gosh, I have no idea. I mean, probably 35 or 40, maybe.
Oh, wow.
I'm not sure. That's just a guess.
So was he able to go back to work?
Yes, he went back to work. And
did he do the same job then?
Well, I don't know if he did the same job or not, but then he started hunting seriously. And he became one of the deer hunters who furnished meat to the Chicago restaurants.
Really?
So at any one time, you could go to my grandpa's house and there might be 3 or 4 or 5 deer hanging up in the shed. And if you look in the Alpena Library, there was an accounting in there of how many deer the Indians shot and how many Grandpa Pake shot. And he shot a lot more than the Indians did. He had a record of 1,000 shots for 1,000 deer.
Remarkable.
Yes, remarkable. So that was quite a reputation.
Yes, yes. Nobody's going to challenge him.
Right. And right next door to his house was a big meat market. So they processed the deer.
Sure.
And it's most.
How did they get them to Chicago?
That I don't know. I don't know. I don't think
Because there
they had
wasn't a whole bunch of refrigeration
Yeah.
then.
I suppose they had to ice it down somewhere.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And on the train, do you suppose?
Yeah, on the train, on the D&M. But he was quite a hunter, and reputation-wise, as I said, the article in the Alpena Library quotes, his record of 1,000 shot with 1,000 deer.
So about when do you think that was?
Oh, that's probably in the 30s.
In the 30s.
And I don't know about the deer regulations at that time. I don't know.
Might not have been many.
He might have been illegally shooting deer. I'm not sure.
Huh.
But
That is pretty
he has quite a
interesting.
reputation. And the Doctor Club, as it stands today, is a beautiful hunting camp. And some of course, the old members are all gone, but he and Frank Prince would go out there and stay for a week or two. Mm-hmm. And Frank Prince had a horse at that time, and so that's how they traveled to the hunting camp. But the camp that they originated still sits out there. It's kind of a tar paper shack in a way, in comparison to what the camp is.
They do upgrade now and then, don't they?
Well, they didn't upgrade this. I mean, but their little old camps are still sitting there. And that's quite a deal.
Yeah.
He had quite a reputation, I mean, for to be a good hunter. So,
Yes.
yeah.
So that was your mother's.
Yes, my mother's father, yeah. Always got a new pair of mittens for Christmas. My grandma knitted.
Uh-huh.
I think I had a collection of about 25 sets of mittens.
Well, you must have not used them.
I didn't use them too much, no. It was quite a deal. So.
Huh.
But Grandpa in his later years would leave his house on River Street and walk over to Chisholm Street and walk all the length of Chisholm Street, visiting as he went.
Oh.
And he always ended up at Martin Martinson's clothing store and Tony and Norm's, because they were members of the Doctors Club.
Oh.
Then he'd make his way over to the Cohen hardware store, and he'd visit there. And then he'd wander on down to Clark Street and end up at our house at noon hour, which was quite convenient for lunch. And he'd spend a couple hours telling me stories, which were very interesting. There's usually Dick Truff and myself would be on the porch listening to Grandpa tell stories.
So how old would you be then?
Oh, 15, 16, somewhere in that area, And then he'd visit my Aunt Nell, who lived across the street, and one of my mother's sisters. And then he'd go up the street, another block, and visit Mrs. McClarty, who was another daughter. And then he'd make his way back over to River Street and back to the house. So that was his daily routine.
Well, he had quite a bit of exercise then, didn't he?
He sure did.
How long did he live? How old was he?
I think he was 91 when he passed away.
He passed away.
Yeah, I was pretty close to it anyway.
Well, sounds like he had a pretty full and rewarding life.
As far as reputation of being a hunter and a woodsman, he was top-notch. They used him as a model for the Au Lumberman's Monument.
Oh, really?
He's the middleman in the three-man statue down there.
Oh.
So that was another little.
Well, sure.
yeah.
I've seen that monument.
Uh-huh.
I've seen that.
He's the middle man. He's the sash man. He's the guy with the sash. So that was pretty good.
Did he ever tell you how he figured out, and was he the one that actually took the log that was the key there?
No stories along that line.
No.
But like I say, I often wonder how they can find the key log and how they get the key log out to
get
break
the
the
rest
log
of the
jam up.
Yeah, because boy, it seems like once that log was taken out of there, somebody
Of course.
better be fast on their feet.
Yeah, that's for sure. And boy, there was a lot of mills back in those days
Yes.
that lined the riverbank, and of course, that's old history. But I mean,
Did you
Remember
ever see any of the log marks that were in the ends of
well, I've
logs?
seen lots of that kind of stuff, and the Besser Museum naturally has a good reputation for all that type of stuff. Incidentally, some of my father's tools from his blacksmithing days is in the Besser Museum, along with I forgot who the blacksmith shop was. It was on Chisholm Street. Anyway, my dad's got a few tools in the Besser deal.
That's a good place for them, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
yes,
a lot
good
of people
exhibition too. Yeah.
get to enjoy those and
Right.
learn something.
Well, he swung a 15-pound sledgehammer for 8 hours a day for 55 years.
55 years.
55 years.
I'll
yes.
bet nobody.
3 days vacation in 55 years.
Wow. Where'd he go?
Well, the funny part was that one time we were going to go on a vacation to Flint, and we had some relatives down there by the name of Freese. And he backed the car out, and in those days they used to have a hinge deal that went on the running board to hold the luggage. And we were all set to leave on a Saturday. And he backed out of the driveway right into the police car. And the policeman was Johnny Lalone, and he says, "Ole, you got to go back to work. They got a big breakdown out at the plant."
Oh.
So that was the beginning and the end of the vacation.
Oh.
We never did make it.
What kind of car?
Oh, Model A. Oh, sure, Ford. He always bought cars from Frank Doane.
Oh, yes.
And also, Mr. Polzine, who had the grocery store, which was next door to the master's shoe shop, always let Dad have the money for the car, and then Dad would make the grocery payments. So on every Saturday, we would go downtown, walk downtown, always ended up at the grocery store. And Dad would make his payment. So the grocery money and the car payment were the same.
Now, was Frank Doane, did he have a business here in Alpena?
Yes,
He
exactly.
also
Right
had-
now where the new Holiday Inn is being built.
Okay. And
On the
didn't he-
riverbank.
Didn't he also have a dealership in either Hillman or Atlanta?
Atlanta.
In Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
'Cause I think I've heard,
Yep.
Different people have-
Frank Doane was well known in the Atlanta Hillman area. And I think he came originally from Atlanta.
he possibly.
Yeah. But his garage was quite a good sized garage, and it was on the bank at the Alpena River, at the riverbank, where the new Holiday Inn is being built. That used to be the Frank Doane car agency. That was a nice deal.
Yes.
Very nice man.
So we've talked about your dad's side of the family and your mother's side were the pigs.
Mom was, my mother and father were, I have to say this in all pride, they were beautiful dancers.
Oh,
And boy, when I was really small, they used to take me to the German Hall, which is on the end of 2nd Avenue, where the Kowalski meat sausage package is today. That used to be the popular place in Alpena. And the German Hall was very, very popular, actually. And I may be wrong, but I can remember, boy, when I was really small, And my mother and dad would take me and put me in the chair deal on the side of the floor, you know. And they danced every dance. Dad was 6'2", my mother was 5'9".
Oh.
And they were a beautiful couple.
Oh.
My mother had red hair, which was even more gorgeous. And Dad was really built, you know, being a blacksmith by naturally.
Yes, yes.
He was in pretty good shape. But they were great waltzers.
Oh.
And
I'll bet people enjoyed that, enjoyed watching
German
them.
Hall was so popular back in those days, I can remember. The place was packed all the time.
How did they meet?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know.
Oh.
I don't know, really. But they were a happy couple. My dad made his own home brew. Had 3 cases of Beck's brewery bottles, 50-gallon crock that was positioned over the bathtub. Often wondered whether I would be here today if that board ever broke and the crock would fall on me taking a bath. My oldest sister and I were the cappers and the bottlers. And Dad would work. He had a huge breakfast. Very light lunch. His dinner pail was very lightly packed. Dinner time also was lunch. When we would eat a supper, Dad would eat a lunch. But he always had 2 bottles of beer for supper. That was my job, to go down to the basement, get the 2 bottles of beer and bring them up. But it was more fun bottling beer. That was a lot of fun.
I'll bet.
Yeah. The bathroom got used quite extensively for beer operation and baths. So. Also, it was pretty popular for the guys in the neighborhood who would come over and help themselves to my dad's beer. And also, every other Sunday or so, Mr. Russo, my father, and Uncle Ralph, who was his brother who lived next door, would end up on our porch singing.
Oh.
So they'd do a little harmony. And
So they entertained the neighborhood.
Yeah, well, kind of in a way. And Mr. Kaufman, who lived across the street, always came over to listen to Dad and Uncle Ralph. And,
what a nice memory.
yeah, Mr. Russo had a beautiful voice. God, he was great. And his son Jack and I, we sang cantatas in the church.
Oh.
Yeah, well, that's a good story. We were like 10, 11 years old. Mr. Michaud was our choir director. And Jack and I were featured as singing cantatas on Sunday in church, Trinity Episcopal Church. We got paid 10 cents a Sunday. I don't think any other choirs in Alpena paid their singers, but we got paid. So we would get our 40 cents on a Thursday. And on the way home, we had to go past Doval's Bakery, which was on 2nd Avenue. And we found out that some of the bakery stuff was put in the alley to cool off. And so we wandered down the alley, and oh boy, the donuts looked very nice. But really attracted was the big snowballs. They were white, like baseballs, rolled in with coconut. And of course, kids 10, 11 years old, we stole a couple of them. And so it got to be a habit on their Thursdays when we got paid, we would make it to Doval's and went down the alley. So that happened a couple, 2, 3 times. And then Big Chip, Polish gentleman, baker at the bakery, kind of laid in wait for us. And he timed it perfectly, and he covered us with eggs. I had a hard time explaining to my mother why I was covered with eggs. And that took care of the
thievery.
took care of the stealing donuts from Doval Bakery. So
I
Oh,
wondered
that
if
was
they
great.
would miss them.
That was a lot of fun.
So you got caught.
That was a lot of fun.
So you went to Alpena School.
Alpena High School,
Did you?
Lincoln School, Avery School. Mr. Fred Traupa, who was a historian, and our, well, he's in charge of all the photographs of Alpena. Him and Mr. Linky. Mr. Linky had the Linky Flower Shop.
I remember that.
Yes. Yeah, Mr. Traupa lived one door over from us. I spent a lot of time at his house. And he had a son, Richard, who was a couple of years older than me. He had a lot of fun teasing me. And he also gave me a job. I got 10 cents for taking the laundry from his house over to Mrs. Johnson, who was 1 block away. So on Sunday, I'd go over to Mr. Traupa's house and get the laundry and take it over to Mrs. Johnson. And Monday, I'd go back and get the laundry and bring it back to Mr. Traupa. I got 10 cents for each trip. 10 cents for taking the laundry and 10 cents for bringing the laundry. The only trouble was that on Monday, he would give me the dime, but he would take it back.
Because?
He's investing it for me.
Oh.
And back in those days, the Detroit newspaper used to run an ad in the paper for insurance. And that's what he did. He bought me an insurance policy. When I got out of service in 1945, he was waiting for me. And he cashed that insurance policy and gave me $250.
Wow.
Accumulated from all those dimes that he...
Wow.
I thought that was terrific. I couldn't wait to buy a car.
Well, and that was a lot of money in 1945, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. He also snickered me. I was over there at his house one day, I should say. Went down the basement. He said, "Come on down here, George. I want to show you something." I went down there, and he had the makings of a boat. He was putting stuff together. He had kind of framework for a boat. Well, that was pretty interesting. But as time went along, I thought, how's he going to get that boat out of the basement?
Yeah.
There's no way he can get it out there. He can't get it out through the window. It's too big. It's way too long to get up the stairs. And I thought, boy, I was snowballed. I couldn't figure that out. Well, he finished the boat, took it all apart, took it up into his garage, put it all together, put it out in the yard on the trailer, put a sign on it for sale. He was just that kind of a gentleman, just that kind of a guy. He challenged himself to make a boat. Had no use for it whatsoever. Absolutely no use for it. And sold it. And I was a pretty perplexed kid. I was a pretty perplexed kid trying to figure out how he got that boat out of the basement. But he finally told me, he took it all apart, piece by piece, put it back together.
Well, that was quite an endeavor.
Oh, it was quite, yeah. But it was fantastic to go to his house and see the pictures that he had. I think he had 10,000 pictures if he had one.
So you say those pictures are mostly at the museum now?
Yes, Yeah, I think all his collection is at the museum.
Wow.
And he was a short, very sharp gentleman. And of course, he ran the Fletcher Paper Company.
Oh.
He was, I don't know what, he was it, I'll say. He had a Buick car, which he took out once a week. And he drove it around the block and put it back in the garage. I can't ever remember him taking the car and going on a trip or anything like that.
What year was this?
Oh my God. Probably 1935, 36, somewhere in there. But I wonder today even how many miles that car had on it.
Wow.
Little side story. He had a son, Richard, and a daughter, Mabel. Phyllis and I took a trip to Jamaica, and we were at the swimming pool, sitting in the big lounge deals, and this couple was next to us. And naturally, we got talking. And I said to the girl, I said, "You look familiar to me for some reason or other." She said, "Well, I'm Mabel Traufer from Alpena." And I said, "Well, I'm George R. Lund from Alpena, your next door neighbor."
Small world.
Small
wow.
world.
How fun.
So they invited us to a party for that evening, and I said, "Well, that's great." So Phyllis and I got dressed up and went to the party. And as the evening wore along, we were the only two there. And I finally asked Mabel, I said, "Are you expecting more company?" She said, "Oh, no." She said, "We're having our own party." So I thought that was pretty nice.
Yes.
That's,
Yes.
That's the kind of thing that's happened to me all my life. I keep running into people I know, haven't seen them in years and everything. And that's another great record from my war experience. I went around the world completely on the USS Saratoga and met somebody from Alpena in every single place I was at.
Wow.
That is not only extraordinary, but it is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. And I think about it today, when you stop and think about how big the world is, and you can meet somebody from Alpena in every place you've been. That's fantastic.
It is. It is. Well, tell me a little bit about your service. When did you go in? Did you?
Real quick, like I started work at the Hearing Industries. Mr. Fletcher, okay. Mr. P.K. Fletcher made sure that I got a job at the Hearing Industries. And I went in as a draftsman, doing work with Nick Nicholson. And then the war hit, and they shifted me from doing drawings into the machine shop, so I became a machinist, which I get pretty darn good at, too. And then, of course, the war came along, and the draft deal, and every time they tried to take me, why, the company said, "No way, he's too expensive or too
valuable for
valuable to go." And my buddy, Bob Van Dusen, we were the same age, we went to high school together and graduated together. He was also in the shop with me. His father was a shop foreman. So we had 7 deferments. One deferment, they sent us to Kalamazoo, sworn in the Navy, and sent us back on inactive duty. Mr. Douglas, who worked at the Besser Company, was in the Navy at that time, and he was in charge of the Besser gun-making deal. And they notified him that we were inactive, and he told us, he said, "Don't worry about it, you don't have to wear uniforms or anything, just keep working." So we kept working, and probably my most embarrassing moment in my lifetime was the time that Bob and I had to go. Our draft deal was came up, and we had to go. So we're down to the train and saying goodbye to everybody. My mother and dad are there, sisters and everybody, Phyllis with the baby, and Michael, my oldest son. And we get on the train to leave, and the train moves about 10 feet, and Uncle Archie McClarty, who was train master at the time, comes running out and hold the train, hold the train. Gets on the train, and he says, "You and Van Dusen got to get off, you got to go back to work."
Oh.
So that was my most embarrassing moment in my lifetime. Everybody on the platform. My brother-in-law was on the train, and he had to go. Everybody's going, and we're on the platform. So that's really an embarrassing situation. So we stayed for another 6 months, and then they took us. And we were fortunate. We went in as second-class seamen. We almost avoided training camp. And then when that was up, actually, we went to Chicago, the Great Lakes Naval Base, and they shipped us out to California. Oh, here starts a good program. This gets better. We go to California, and Bob got sick, and he had to go to sick bay. They put me on the Saratoga, and they put him on the Langley because he was a week behind me.
Oh.
So I didn't see him anymore. That was the end of Bob. I met a couple guys in the Navy, old chums and stuff, you know. So we go on leave down to San Francisco, in San Francisco. The USO Club was beautiful. The sidewalks were 50 feet wide and hundreds of people walking. And we're walking along, and I said to one of the guys who was with us, I said, holy fright, I said, I think there's a girl from Alpena up there. Imagine this now, the sidewalk is full of people. And I recognize a girl from Alpena. And we kept walking, and I got up alongside of her, I put my arm around her, and I said, Margaret, how are you? Oh, she bought floor. Her home was right there on the corner. She married Bill Martinson, and they owned that house right there on the corner.
I'll be darned.
I knew that head of hair because I sat in back of it all the way through school, all the way through grade school, all the way through high school. I knew that head of hair, and I recognized it. And the beauty part of it was they had an apartment there in San Francisco, and Mickey Mahargan, his wife, who lived kitty corner from us, were with Bill and Margaret. So that was the start of meeting somebody.
It's just like a reunion, around the world reunion.
Well, it was one of those crazy things. Then, of course, I went to Hawaii, got leave and liberty and so forth and fun in Hawaii. Walked on the main street, and the first guy I meet is Al Nordstrom from Alpena. The next day, I meet Johnny Stoner in an emplacement deal. So that's two Alpena guys, right off the bat. And from there on in, well, I won't go through the war stuff. I mean, I was in 7 major engagements.
Oh, you were.
I have ribbons, naturally, so forth and so on. After the Marianas campaign, they sent the Sarah to Sydney, Australia. Sydney, Australia, we're at the USO. They give us a card for a case of beer or booze or whatever we wanted. So a bunch of us go to the USO deal, and we got in the line, the beer line. And as I walked along the line with a bunch of fellas in front of me, I thought, the guy handing out the beer looked awfully familiar. And as I got closer, I started to laugh, and I couldn't believe it. It was Charlie Kimball. And he said, Ole, give us I forget what I got a bottle of booze, I guess it was. And he said, go around the corner, go around the corner. So I went around the corner in the room, and there was a chow line there. Here's Earl Dumpsch, our insurance man.
Oh.
Earl said, there's Henry over there. Across the room was Hank Lamar. So there was 3 Alpena people in one building in Sydney, Australia. So now they detach us and send us down to Tasmania, which is the country below.
Mm-hmm.
We went through 100-foot seas. We lost 3 planes off the bow of the ship. The Sarah tilted almost 45 degrees in the seas.
Oh, wow.
If she'd have rolled more, we wouldn't be here today. The seas were tremendous. We had 3 cans with us, the Fanning, the Dunlop, and the Cummings. That crew, those crews, did nothing but just hang on through all those rough seas. So we get to Hobart, Tasmania, and the Sarah went into the harbor, of course, and she couldn't stop quite suddenly. I mean, couldn't stop as far as the harbor was concerned, so we hit the dock and moved the dock about 50 feet up the shoreline.
Oh dear.
I don't think the Hobart people appreciated that too much, but anyway, we got leave and liberty in Hobart, in Tasmania. And they had horse carriages, you know, the little two-wheel deals, and horse carriages go around and so forth. Got into the livery stable deal where they were, and here's Jimmy Davison from Alpena. So that was quite a deal. So we toured Tasmania, laughed like crazy about it. He said, if we ever get back home, he said, you're going to buy me a drink. And I said, sure. I said, stop by anytime. You know. Well, 10, 15 years after the war was over with, one Sunday morning there's a knock on the door, and I went down to see what was what, and here's Jimmy Davison on the porch. She says, I came for that drink. Which was something.
Wow.
So from Tasmania, Hobart, we went around to Perth on the western side of Australia. There we joined the British fleet. So I was in the British Navy for 6 months.
Oh.
We had the heavy cruiser Richelieu. She was -1 gun. And the Victoria carrier from the British fleet. And they had a couple, 2, 3 cans. So we spent 6.5 to 7 months bombing Sumatra, Surabaya, Sumatra, you know, where the big, what did they call the big wave? The big
The tsunami.
Went over Sumatra, you know, a few years ago.
Yes.
I didn't think there was anything left of the thing. We bombed the hell out of it, you know. But then from there, we were detached. We went around the big Horn of Africa, across over to New York. And I got off the ship in New York and went back to Great Lakes. And from Great Lakes, they shipped me to Philadelphia. Philadelphia, they shipped me to Boston. And I was assigned to a new carrier, the President Roosevelt. And she wasn't being finished in time, so they broke the crew up. And they gave me a choice, a heavy cruiser or an APA, and I took the heavy cruiser Columbus. So she goes out for her shakedown cruise, and somebody left a brass bar in the transmission gears or something. Anyway, it ruptured a whole bunch of stuff, and they had to tow the Columbus back into port, put it in dry dock, and they had to repair. So there was like 8 weeks or 9 weeks I didn't do a darn thing but play billiards at the USO. But anyway, they got the ship organized, went on her shakedown cruise. We ended up in Cuba, Guantanamo Bay. Played baseball 2 or 3 days in a row, went for a swim in a swimming pool, dove in, come up face to face with my cousin Jimmy Freese from Flint. So that was another deal. And while I was in Philadelphia, Phyllis came down to visit me and stayed in a beautiful little apartment for a couple of weeks. One of my chums brought his car over from Ohio. I borrowed that, and we went into New York, went to Radio City Center, walked in, they had a big Navy display, and that was great. And out of the corner of my eye, I caught a guy that looked kind of familiar, and it was Jack Lappin from Lappin Insurance, you know.
Well.
And not only that, but in Philadelphia, we're going around a corner. There's a guy standing on the corner, my cousin Dale Russo. So I rolled down the window. I said, Dale, you need a ride? He busted out in tears. He was always crying about anything anyway. He couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it either, as far as that's concerned. But that's just an example of what happened.
I hope you have pictures of these different individuals.
I don't have a single picture.
You don't have?
Not a single picture, but that is an absolute honest portrayal of what happened to me in service.
So you were in from what year to what year?
42 to 45.
To 45.
Yeah. So that was quite a deal.
Well, and you did go around the world. You were.
Yes. Yeah, that was wonderful, actually. There's some other instances. Oh, I was in Boston at the Fargo building, which is the biggest recruitment building in the world, I guess. And I had my first shrimp salad. And stupid me, I asked, what is that? And the guys at the table laughed like crazy. They said, my God, a shrimp. I said, well, I never, ever, ever had any shrimp salad. So it was one of those things. So Jimmy Ferrier and I were in Boston. And we went to Revere Beach, which is a notorious beach. It's something like Coney Island in New York. Hundreds of people on the beach. We're sitting in the sand in our bathing suits, and lo and behold, here comes a girl down the beach. And I said to Jimmy, you're not going to believe this. I said, here comes a girl from Alpena. Oh, God. He shook his head. It's unbelievable. Mary Spence.
Oh.
Dr. Spence's sister. And she was pregnant, and her husband was a pilot. Introduced me, and she said her husband was leaving. And she said, can you come to the hospital when the baby is born? I didn't have anything to write down, so I forgot the name. And I kept looking in the paper and kept looking in the paper, and I didn't recognize the name. So 30, 40 years or 50 years later, I'm in Boyne City mailing my orders into that mortar. I'm going to the post office, and here comes Mary Spence out of the post office. She took one look and recognized me, and she had the finger up, and she said, USOB? And she was giving me hell. And the people going into the post office were all enjoying the... I apologized to Mary. I said, Mary, I couldn't remember your name. And I said, I really couldn't have made it to the hospital anyway. But she didn't.
She held it against you all those
that
years.
At all. So. And the tragic thing, she got killed by a falling beam in Florida.
Oh.
In a hurricane. She went back in the house to get her cat, and the beam fell down and killed her. Yeah. Oh. That was terrible. Really terrible.
Well, you've mentioned your wife, Phyllis.
Phyllis,
Tell me about
beautiful
her,
Phyllis.
How you met, when you got married.
Well, this is funny because the girl I'm with right now was very sweet on me in high school, which I'm very proud to say. She was very sweet on me in high school. And we got together quite a bit. In fact, in those days, the Trianon nightclub, which was up over the Alpena Furniture Store,
okay,
that was our Friday hangout. Every high school kid went to the Trianon to dance. And so I danced a lot with Boots and so forth and so on. It was kind of nice with Boots. But on the way home from school one day, Phyllis was in front of me and she dropped her books and everything on the sidewalk. So one of those crazy high school deals, you know, I helped her pick up her books and all this and that kind of stuff, and I walked her home. She lived in Lockwood Street, 510 Lockwood Street. And it's just one of those things. We just automatically started seeing each other and ended up, of course, we got married. Trinity Episcopal Church, had a beautiful wedding. And God, the girls were gorgeous. And the guys were really, I used my cousins, Jack Russo and Bud McClarty. And our first apartment was across the street from the Wachterhauser funeral home.
Oh.
Mr. Reed, who was a high school teacher, had the apartment. It cost us $15 a month. That was pretty expensive.
Was it?
Yeah. But
and
then,
what year was this?
1941.
41.
And of course, then I got a job at the Hearing Industries, and that started the career deal. So it was great. But we traveled a lot.
How many children did you have?
4. 2 boys, 2 girls. Michael, Tim, Christy, and Lisa. Tim is here right now playing golf with Gary, her husband. Michael, my son, Michael is one of those, I see him about once every 10 years, I think.
Oh,
He's busy.
I'll tell you, he is like Quicksilver. He's never any place where I'm at. But he's got all my war material stuff,
oh,
and which is not too much, but he's got everything. Tim, of course, is a General Motors retiree. Real nice kid. Hard to get along with. Lives with me in Florida now. And of course, my beautiful daughter, Christy. And my very talented daughter, Lisa, who was rebuilding her home. And she works for Whiskey Brown Insurance Agency in Traverse City. She has a very good job. Got a bunch of grandkids and stuff.
I'll bet you do.
And Craig is my oldest one. He has a son. Who else have I got? We got Travis. Travis is, well, of course, Jamie, naturally. That's Lisa's daughter. She's great. And she has a daughter who is absolutely astounding. And Travis, who is an adopted boy. Yeah, Mike, my oldest son, Mike. I keep calling him, everybody calls him Max. So I suppose I should call him Max.
You can call him whatever you want. He's your son.
He's like Quicksilver. He's never around. I never see him. But he owns a few things in Alpena, and he's done pretty good. But Travis is really something interesting.
He's involved with sailing.
He's not only involved in sailing, he's got, how many sailboats? Something like
He's in charge of about 100 sailboats out of San Francisco.
Oh, in San Francisco.
yeah,
Teaching.
Teaching sailing
teaching sailing.
out
And
of
he's
San
got about
Francisco.
100 sailboats that he leases out.
Wow.
He works for a big company.
Well, it must be fun.
You know, European company.
Uh-huh.
And he's just got married a few months ago. Katia?
Katia, she's a Portuguese lady.
Yeah, Katia, yeah. She's beautiful. Beautiful singer. And I've got something going with her. I said, you know, we'll make a good duet when you show up. Because I love to sing. In fact, I sing a song to my girlfriend every night.
Well, good for you.
I use A.B. Crow's songbook. He's got 100 songs in that book. And every night, 10 o'clock, Boots calls me and I call her. I sing a song to her.
Well, that's very nice. That's very nice.
There's a
So where did you go to church?
Trinity Episcopal Church.
Trinity Episcopal Church here in Alpena.
Yes. Yep. My father was a warden and I was a junior warden. I had the privilege of collecting money every Sunday.
Good job.
Yeah, it was all right. Yeah.
How
Reverend,
many?
Reverend McLean, Reverend. Oh, sure. Forgot the minister's name.
Mr. Runkle. Reverend Runkle.
Yeah, but before him.
Oh,
Before him. Isn't that terrible? I mean, I forgot his name.
Well, you've done pretty well on names so far. We're going to forgive you on this one.
But Mr. Runkle was minister of the church for a number of years. In fact, his wife lives next door. So,
How many brothers and sisters did you have?
2 sisters, that's it, and 1 brother who was born, well, I guess didn't make it. So, I was the favorite son of the family, you know. Spoiled, yes. Very much so.
And what were your sisters' names?
Oriet and Cleo.
Cleo.
Yeah. Oriet was married to Robert Wilcox, a lawyer from Detroit. Cleo was married to Howard Sherry from Alpena. who was a deputy sheriff at one time. Both nice sisters. Did a lot of taking care of me when I was young.
Well, are they still surviving?
No, both of them are passed away.
They're passed. And what about your wife? How many brothers and sisters did she have?
A brother and two sisters, Eunice and Mary. Both of them departed. Dale died very young, 35. Her father was Wesley Habermill, owned the Alpena Lumber Company, worked at the Alpena Oil Company for onions, hundreds of years. I mean, God, it seemed to me like it forever. But he went into the lumber business, and he had the Alpena Lumber Company, which was up on Washington Avenue.
This is your wife's?
Her father.
Her father.
Yeah. And her mother's name was Gladys. She was a wonderful girl. A lot of fun. Gosh, she was a lot of fun. And of course, when you say fun, Wes is, he was the forerunner of fun. He was very popular guy.
And what was her last name? What was her maiden name?
Habermill.
Habermill.
Phyllis Habermill. A lot of the Habermills are out around Hubbard Lake.
Uh-huh.
And the family reunion is usually 100 and 150 people.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a lot of Habermills, a lot of the family in that, you know. The Batters were part of that. She was a Batter girl. And yeah, that was a pretty good family. Wes was a great hunter and always had bird dogs. He's always lived with the philosophy that if you were living, you had to have a dog. It didn't make any difference how old you were, you had to have a dog. He also had a racehorse.
Oh.
Honor Vavius. One of the last racehorses that did the buggy races at the Alpena Fair.
Oh.
Along with Jack Mainville and a few others. It was great.
Did you hunt? Were you a hunter?
I never saw any reason to really hunt, although I liked doing it. But Wes did all the deer hunting. Didn't have to go shoot any deer with him around. And of course, my son Max, he's got my guns, and he does hunting, and he's very much the hunter of the family. He's got his hunting camp up in Newberry, and he goes out to Colorado and Wyoming, elk hunting and so forth and so on.
It's a good tradition to carry on.
Jim, my son, doesn't care about hunting whatsoever. So. But I went to the Remington hunting camp for many years. I mean, I was a guest. Lots of fun. So.
What do you remember of the Depression years?
Horhide shoes. Horhide shoes. I'll never forget those shoes as long as I live.
Well, tell me about those shoes.
I hate putting them on. I hated lacing them up. I hated wearing them. They always looked ugly, and they were hard, and you had to keep greasing them up. I can remember my dad greasing my shoes. I think I was the happiest kid in the world when I got my first pair of high tops.
Oh.
With the jackknife pocket on the side.
Oh.
Oh, man, was that a big deal. That was really something.
So why did you have the horhide shoes?
That's because of what my mother and dad could afford. I mean, that's what most kids wore back in those days anyway. It was all shoes. There weren't too many tennis shoes or gymnasium shoes, you know. The kids wore horhide shoes. I don't think any kids liked them.
Maybe not.
I think it was
It was the bane of their existence.
Oh, God, yeah.
What else do you remember? What other, say, sacrifices did you have to make because of the Depression?
That I don't know, because I had lots of clothes to wear and lots of food to eat. My mother was a really good cook. In fact, all the church recipes, and all the church books in Alpena have got my mother's recipes in them. She was quite popular.
Dad, talk about Grandma and the neighbors and how they cooked and shared.
Oh yeah, that was a natural situation. We lived in a Norwegian neighborhood,
Okay.
and it was one of those things at Christmas time. The women would go from house to house and help cook up stuff for
Oh,
Christmas, all the Christmas goodies and so forth and so on. But everyday life, my mother made the pies. Oh God, she made good pies. She made the pies, and I would take a pie over to my Aunt Nell, who lived kitty corner from us, who made the baked beans, and I would bring the baked beans back home, and then take another pie over to Mrs. Kaufman, who made the bread, and then bring the bread back. So that was a new and natural routine every Saturday. And then Mrs. Clee, who lived on the corner over here, she used to get into the act once in a while. A couple different things that she would make, and my mother would send a pie over to her. But I can honestly say, I never ever saw my mother's cupboard bare of pie. There was always pie on that cupboard.
it must have been a big joy for her to do that.
She made beautiful apple pies, and she made beautiful cream pies. Never made any berry pies.
Oh,
That's something I never understood. She never made strawberry pies, but always cream pies, apple pies, butterscotch pie, scutterbush, she called them.
oh,
I made scutterbush. And the beauty part of it was she would make these pies, but she always made one this big for me.
you were spoiled.
Slightly.
Yes.
Slightly. Every pie that she ever made, she made a small one for me.
Oh.
Yeah.
Do you remember any particular remedies that your mom used on you if you or your sisters got ill or you scratched yourself or whatever? Was there any unusual thing, or did you just go to the doctor, or
Never
How
went,
was
never
that?
went to a doctor except for a broken collarbone. That was Dr. Foley. And I honestly can't remember ever being sick. I honestly can say that I don't think I've ever been sick a day in my life.
well,
Not too many times.
you are?
I had chicken pox. And that's the only thing I can ever remember ever.
And there wasn't much remedy for that, was there?
No, there wasn't.
And there, I don't think.
And I didn't have a big case of chicken pox. It was a very mild case of chicken pox, if you can call it mild, I guess. I honestly can say I've never been sick. I have both hips replaced, and the right knee replaced, and the right shoulder done, and thank God I haven't had a brain transplant yet. But
Was there ever an event, say in this area or in Alpena, that sticks out in your mind?
event?
It,
Yes, one of my greatest things, my dad had pitched the 7-inning game down in the hard sands in back of the Abitibi plant. Dad was a great pitcher, great ball player. And then he broke his shoulder and he had to quit pitching baseball.
oh,
So then he took over umpiring. And so he umpired every single baseball game that was ever played in Alpena. He was the governor of baseball. He settled disputes in Sheboygan, Rogers City, and Harrisville, and so forth and so on. He was the commissioner of baseball.
oh,
Very well known. Never any arguments about my dad because at 6'2", 230 pounds, and he said you were out. There was never any arguments. That was a funny deal too. Ray Skiba came skipping at the home plate one time. Dad called him out. He was a banty rooster. Boy, he went right in my dad's face. He'd call him everything but a white man. When my father passed away and walked to Hauser Funeral Home, he's in the casket and Ray Skiba comes in. Of course, all the baseball players showed up for Dad's funeral. And Ray stood at Dad's casket and he started to laugh and he was embarrassed and he went out. And my sister Ori and I went out with him. I said, what was that all about? He said, I'll never ever forget the day, he says, your dad called me out. He says, and I went up at him like crazy, and my dad took him by the shirt front and lifted him right off the ground with one hand. He said, Ray, you're out. Ray says, that's something you just don't ever forget.
I'll bet not.
But softball was very, very popular in Alpena, 16-inch softball. There must have been 16, 18, 20 teams in Alpena.
Explain to me the 16-inch.
16-inch in diameter. 16-inch ball is this big.
Oh, okay, okay.
It was played with 11 men on the team. There were 2 shortstops up in front of the pitcher. Regular baseball and softball teams are 9 men. But 16-inch ball calls for 2 shortstops in front of the pitcher.
Okay.
Very popular because it was played with padded suits in the Memorial Hall. So they had to wear padded suits because of the floor. You know.
Oh,
But as it graduated and came out, of course they didn't wear padded suits. But they did have the 2 shortstops up in front. So 16-inch softball was very, very popular. My dad was a great pitcher in softball, indoor softball. So Billy Ludwig comes over to my dad's house one night and he says, Dad, Ole, he said, can you get an old team together, the older guys? We want to have a young team against an old team, you know, old timers game, you know. So Dad thought about it. He says, yeah, he says, I think I can get a team together. And luckily, Billy Dust, who was on the 1905 Alpena High School team, was still living. And Dad called him, and he said, geez, he said, Ole, that'd be great, you know. Now, to give you an idea how fast a pitch my dad could throw, it's 32 feet from pitcher's box to the home plate. My dad, the size of him, was like unleashing a bolt of lightning. That ball was just terrific. Billy Dust used to wear a breadboard under his jersey to keep from getting hammered to death by my dad. Out of the 10 fingers on his hands, he had 7 of them broken by my dad.
wow.
So anyway, Dad puts a team together. Billy O'Dill, Bid Smith, who has a place out on 32, Joe Lee, Freddie Smith also. Anyway, Dad put a team together. And the young whippersnappers come down to beat the hell out of Dad, you know. Well, he pitched 7 innings and they never got a hit in 7 innings. They never saw it. The next night, I think half the pitchers of the 16 teams that were in Alpena were over at my dad's house to find out how to pitch that 16-inch ball. They never saw works on a 16-inch ball. But my dad could throw an out, he could throw an in, he could throw a drop, and he called his hucklebuckle ball. His hucklebuckle ball came right off the rudder, and it was on a direct 45-degree line, you know, to the catcher. That was his hucklebuckle ball, they called it. They never got a hit. They never got a hit in 7 innings. The crowd went crazy. And all these young guys were over to my dad's house the next night. We got to learn how to do this.
I'll bet. I'll bet.
And of course, Dad reveled in that. He just thought that was just wonderful, you know. But thinking back in the days when Memorial Hall was so popular, boy, that must have been quite a deal. I mean, to play softball inside the building.
Yeah.
They played the world's inning, or the world's.
Uncle Carl Nelson beat the New York Celtics 3 games in a row for the world's indoor title.
Oh, wow.
The McDougal boys, who owned the Owl Cafe, they put the match on. They were instrumental in staging that. Yeah, my Uncle Carl Nelson was a better pitcher than my dad, even, yes.
Well, when they pitch it, do they pitch overhand? Do they pitch underhand? Underhand.
Underhand, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was terrific.
Well, that would have been pretty neat to see.
Yeah.
Very neat to see.
And the funny part was Con Ballore and Foster and Stella Shea. They were all short little guys, and they all wore great big jerseys. because they were the shortstops. And they could catch the ball in the jersey rather than in the hands.
Self-preservation.
Yeah, that was quite a deal. Well, when somebody got a hit in 16-inch ball, that was really something, you know. But boy, it was wonderful to watch my dad pitch. I mean, although he only pitched the one game, it was a revelation. I mean, you know, the guys they never saw anything like that. So,
Well, that's
that was
pretty
great.
neat.
That was quite a write-up in the paper about that one.
Okay, and you graduated in 1936?
1939.
39. Okay.
And that was quite a deal too. I mean, that's George Bott and I played as kids. Lincoln School. Jimmy Guerra's house was on the corner. Maury Olson's house was on the other corner. Jack Carlson's street across the street. Sonny France was down the street. Every Saturday, us kids in the neighborhood, there was 42 kids.
Wow.
We played baseball at Lincoln School in the sandlot. Every Saturday was ball. Market Square over at Chisholm Street and River Street on the corner, which of course is all paved over today. That used to be the baseball diamond. Every Saturday, every kid that could walk was at Market Square to play baseball. Sometimes we'd have enough for two teams. Sometimes we'd have to have the same guys play for each team. You make sure it was going. But every Saturday it was a exodus of the north side over to the Market Square.
That was such a healthy thing to do, wasn't it?
Oh my God! And not only that,
Yeah.
just to walk from Lincoln School over there was quite a deal. But every Saturday was a mass of kids playing baseball. Jimmy Guerra, of course, was one of the popular ones. But George Bott and I played also, I mean. So in high school, we're in drawing class, and we're always yakking about baseball, right? This and that and this sort of. George's dad was a very popular baseball player, High Bott. So Mr. Waters, who was the teacher, said, you know, you guys keep talking about baseball all the time. Why don't you put a team together, you know? So we did. So George Bott and I got together, and we recruited some players. And we went to Mr. Geisel, who was the principal of the school, asked him if it was okay and everything. He says, fine. He said, but you have to get the okay of the school board. And he said, you got to get a coach. Well, we thought we had a coach with Bob Hasty. He refused to play to be baseball coach because he was taking care of baseball or basketball and football. So we asked Mr. Henry, who was a popular teacher. Well, he was doing all the booking and the book work for the high school baseball or basketball and football. So he said, why don't you ask Mr. Sloniger? So we did. The funny part was Mr. Sloniger, he didn't know a baseball from basketball. But we needed a coach. So he said, hey, he was willing to do it. He said he didn't know anything about it, but he was willing to do it. So we got together, and of course we would walk from the high school up to the fairgrounds. That was the only baseball diamond that we could use. And so we started doing this. And the trouble was that we started so late in the school year, we only played one game in 1936.
Oh.
We played Roger City, and we beat them, of course, naturally. We never lost a game except one. I lost the game. But in 1937, we played Roger City, and then we played Harrisville. Now imagine all us kids were in street clothes. We didn't have any uniforms. We had 3 baseballs and 3 baseballs and 4 bats. That's what we started with. And we played Harrisville. They were pretty well equipped because Kai Kyler, did you hear of him? He was the only Major League Baseball player in all of northern Michigan. And he made sure that the Harrisville team got stuff. He made sure they got mitts and bats and balls and everything, you know. We had to borrow everything. we had to borrow the county league mask and the chest protector. We would use them on Saturday, but we had to take them back on Saturday because the county league played on Sunday. So anyway, we got the team started, and that's what we ended up with. We ended up with 10 guys. Mike Fitzpatrick was one of them, but he dropped out, and so we ended up with nine guys. So then each year, naturally, we included more schools, Gaylord, Sheboygan. We even played East Tawas one time. And we never lost a game, except Fairview, Mayo. Stack Conley was our pitcher. He was good, really good. He was pitching in the county league as well as high school. So the day we played Fairview, Mayo, he didn't want to pitch because he was pitching Sunday in the county league. Big deal. So he begged out, and I said, okay, so I'm secondary pitcher, and Norb Donikoski is third pitcher. So Norb pitches 3 innings, and I pitched the last 4. And I served up one good ball, and Jimmy Miller nailed it, and he knocked it over. Stack Conley took my place in right field, and Stack was portly. He didn't run very good. So Jimmy Miller knocked the ball over Stack's head, infield, in park, home run.
Oh.
He should have been out, you know, if Stack could have ran fast enough to get the ball. Well, the funny part of it is, all this is that that's the only game we lost. We lost it 1-0. And in the school, in the awards deal, when we had a high school back in those days, you used to have big assembly, you know, and you award the letters out, you know. Mr. Slaniger was hesitant as to give whether he should give me my letter or not because I lost the baseball game. I said, that's pretty good. God.
Well.
But that was one of those things. Anyhow, that's the only game we lost, and I was the pitcher for that.
So you're going to take the responsibility.
I take the responsibility. Yeah. That was a good one. That was really good. That was a lot of fun.
Well, I thank you. This has been a
revealing deal.
Fun conversation here.
The only thing is that they forgot to, should have been Orville. And
oh, they left out the R?
Yeah.
Okay.
Orville Hanner would be really mad if he saw that. But that's great. Well, I hope I gave you something. I mean,
well, I thank you. This is, and for inviting us into your home and
I could go on for hours here, you know.
Yes, you could.
Well, we
I
appreciate
know a lot
your-
about Hillman, let me tell you.
Uh-oh.
I know a lot about Hillman. Billy Lake, I mean, he had the Chrysler dealership. Mork Holmes, the Chevrolet dealership. The Farrier boys had the Ford dealership. Atkinson's had the hardware store and the Benacks. I know a lot about Hillman. Little shorty, oh God, what was his name? Had the bar. Come on, help me out here.
The baby bar?
I'll think of his name after you leave, naturally. He was a comic. He was really funny. He had the bar on the corner, across from, up the street from Atkinson's Hardware.
Highway Inn?
Highway Inn. Yeah. But he was a character. And a fellow by Jimmy Mason from Midland, who was a deer hunter, used to come up and he'd harass the bartender like crazy. It was all a big deal, you know, see. Well, the story goes that one particular day, deer season, the beginning of deer season, Jimmy shows up and there was a tree outside and it had a big bee's nest in it, and the branch broke off with the bee's nest in it. And the story goes that Jimmy walks into the bar with the tree branch with the big beehive on her. He says to the bartender, the little guy there is, so you're going to buy one or not? And the story goes that on the bar, you know, there's always one of those great big glass bowls where they had candy bars and all that stuff. It goes that he says, sure, took and emptied everything out and filled it up with, with about 1.5 gallons of beer. Set it up on the bar. Set it up on the bar. Oh God, what the heck was his name?
Well, if you figure it out, well, let us know and
I'll tell
we
you,
can
it's
put it
right
in
on the tip
there.
of my tongue. Is what.
Oh.
It's
Well,
Mark Holmes had a dandy too. He had a mechanic that spent more time sleeping under the car than he did working on the car. And something happened. There was some kind of a fight deal with Ron Hillman, and it included Mark Holmes. And the guy got even with him, but he took a calf and put it in Moore's office when Moore wasn't there, and the calf, of course, crapped all over Moore's office. Jesus, I know those names and I can't think of it. But that's a terrible thing. I mean, that really was a terrible thing.
I'll bet.
Oh, God.
I bet it was a shock.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
You don't want any more stories?
Thank you. That's really been
This
fun.
is,
I'm just getting started.
I know.
Did you want to know something about the Mackinac Bridge?
Sure.
I was the only salesman allowed in the Mackinac Bridge.
what did you sell?
Nuts and bolts.
Nuts and bolts.
And that's the big joke everybody says. Jesus, don't go over that bridge. Ole sold all the nuts and bolts. It's going to fall down someday.
That was quite the deal, wasn't
Yep. Dr. Steinman, who was the designer of the bridge, stayed at the Orange Lodge where I stayed in St. Ignace. There were 7 rooms in there, and I had one, and he had the other 6.
it? Oh.
All the blueprints for the bridge were in the rooms.
Oh.
Very articulate gentleman. Every word he spoke, he clipped off. It was a funny accent situation. His words were just clipped. And so, of course, I'm in the hardware business. Naturally, you have to take the ferry over, so forth and so on. I was on the last trip that the ferry made, incidentally, too. So I met Dr. Steinman in the lodge, and he said he wanted to know what I was doing, and I told him I was a hardware salesman. And he said, well, you're calling on the bridge. And I said, no. Well, he said, you will be. And he took out his card and wrote a note on it. He said, you go see Lum Doyle. I said, okay. So I went down to see Lum Doyle, and Lum Doyle said, okay, you're the salesman, and you and only you will be allowed to call on the bridge. So all the nuts and bolts and the repair stuff that goes in the Mackinac Bridge, I sold for 32 years.
Wow.
Nice.
That's something.
Good for you.
That is.
Good for
Yeah.
you.
I started the Alpina Supply Company. That was something else. And I went from there to the Northern Supply Company because Northern Supply Company didn't like the competition I was giving them. So they hired me away. So then Phyllis had the small children at home, and she was really kind of anxious for me to get off the road because I would leave Monday and get back Friday. Like that. So I quit Northern Supply Company, went to work at the WATZ,
Oh, yes.
and Steve Wright wants to do an interview on me, and Ronnie Goodburn, who was my copywriter, which is interesting too. And then my father-in-law threw a curve at me. He said, I want to retire. How about taking over the lumber company? I said, holy crap, that's a pretty good deal, So I tell Phyllis about it, and she says, no, absolutely, you cannot work for my father. I said, I'm not going to work for him. I'm going to run the place. He's giving it to me. Well, she was right. He never left. He didn't want to retire. He just thought he wanted to retire. So there was the clashing of the minds and everything, Finally, I said, the hell with it, I quit. So I went out the door and went downtown and ran into A.B. Crow, who was a salesman at the WATZ. He said, I'm leaving to go to Kokomo. He said, why don't you take my job? I said, okay, why not, So I took over. He made me mad to start with. He said, everything's sold. He said, all you got to do is service it. Well, to a salesman, you don't say that. Everything's sold. So I went out and sold 50% more the first year than he ever sold. They're still running programs that I sold. So that was quite a deal. And then I ended up going with Curtis Industries out of Cleveland, Ohio. I still don't know why I did that, but it turned out to be a real good job. It was good. So I traveled the territory from Bay City, Midland, to Sault Ste. Marie to Wisconsin.
Wow.
So if you want some snow stories, I got them. I think that's enough for the day, don't you?
Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate you.
Well, I still don't understand what's going on, but I mean, if you think that that's enough, that's fine.
Well, we'll put it together and see what you think.